What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Woody coming at you today with the tournament recap for the Hobie BOS on the Harris chain. This wasn't a great tournament for me. It wasn't a terrible tournament. I finished 60th out of 155 anglers. I fished Lake Bouclair. The water there was really clear, which I knew going into it, which is one reason why I went to go take a look at it. I knew there was going to be clean water there, and a lot of these other lakes are pretty dirty and get pretty dirty really easily, so I like fishing clean water. That's where I feel comfortable, and I started looking to find some good spots on Bouclair. I got a few bites right away. I shook everything off the first day, minus one fish that I just couldn't help but hook, unfortunately. Same thing on the second day of practice. But all of those fish that I got bites off of, you know, indicated to me that there were going to be fish in the area, and that I could come back to that and it would be good. And I was right. I did come back, and on tournament day, when I came in on day one, I rolled through a spot that I had gotten a bunch of bites, and I saw even out on nothing there were a bunch of fish out. It looked like they were, like, you know, chasing bait or something. They weren't surfacing. You couldn't see them schooling, but just the way that they were moving around and the fact that they were just kind of out suspended in the middle of nowhere indicated to me that they were in a pretty active mood, and I was right. Me and a couple other people who were fishing that area together wound up fishing in that one spot for probably about an hour, and everybody was consistently kind of getting bites that I could see that was fishing around. So after that slowed down a little bit, I decided to try to make a move out to the middle of the lake, which was a mistake. The wind was blowing enough that day that it wasn't completely unmanageable, but it was really difficult to fish in the Hobie BOS. For those of you who don't know, you're not allowed to use a motor on the kayak. So I was out there with the pedal drive and a paddle, and it was really difficult to maintain control of the boat. I don't have a power pole, so it's not like I could just go out there and drop a power pole and just kind of sit still. I do have an anchor, but a 5-pound anchor when the wind is blowing 15 to 20 is not really going to do much for you. So after going out there and trying to deal with the conditions and catch some fish out in the wind, I pushed back up to where I had previously been fishing, you know, further down lake from where I was, but in a more protected area. And I went back to fishing the same way, and I was catching them again, some non-scoreable fish and a couple of really small fish. The main fish that really counted for me, the first fish of the day, it was kind of funny actually, because, you know, I saw people catching them around me and I hadn't caught one yet. And I just needed to get that bite to get some confidence. And when I was drifting along over this just open area, I was looking at the graph, and I literally went right over the top of like 2 fish. And I said, you know what, why not? I picked up my spinning rod. I had a weightless trick worm on it. I literally dropped it down and dropped it right on the fish's head, and it immediately ate it. And I snatched it and just pulled it right back up into the boat, you know what I mean? Snatched him up real quick. So that was a good feeling to get that bite, and especially like that. The fish was super skinny, super post-spawn. So you could tell that he, she, whatever it was like a 16 or a 16.5 inch fish, I think. It might have been 15, I don't remember. But either way, it wasn't big, it wasn't a memorable fish, other than the way that I caught it, and like I said, getting that first bite and kind of getting my confidence going a little bit. After that, I got a couple more bites in that area. A couple of them were non-scoreable, and then I moved on and started making those other moves. So after I had gone out to the middle and tried to fish in the wind, I pushed back up to the north side of the lake, which was protected. The wind was blowing out of the northeast, and used the houses and the trees and stuff like that as protection. And I just kind of fished down that area, and I came to a spot where there were a lot of beds, like a lot of beds. And since the water's so clear, you know, you'd be able to see the bottom in like 6, 7, 8 feet of visibility. I'm sure most days maybe you'd be able to see the bottom in 9 or 10 feet on a good day in that lake. But I got in there and I started looking around at all these beds, and they just didn't have fish on them. But when I came to one good fish on a bed, and I managed to catch that one, that again brought my confidence up a little bit, and it allowed me to, that was my limit, I believe that was my limit, or it might have been the next fish after that, but my confidence came up a little bit more. By the end of day one, I was sitting at like 78.25 inches, so I knew that I wasn't going to win it. or probably even finish in like the top 5 unless I just had an absolutely stellar day on day 2 and everybody else kind of tanked. So I went back out on day 2 and I tried to replicate the same thing that I was doing, but in a different area of the lake that was now more accessible because the wind was not blowing so hard. On day 2, it was like just about flat calm most of the day, which I think kind of hurt the bite, but it did allow me to get out and work some of the areas in the middle that I had seen in practice that I really wanted to touch in the tournament. And I got a couple of fish early on, which again brought my confidence level up, but I knew they weren't the quality of fish that I needed. So as I kind of continued to work this grass flat out in the middle that I was on, another angler, I'm not going to say who it was, but he ended up finishing pretty high up and cut a good check. He came out to where I had been fishing. I was just kind of making the block and going around, and like I literally turned the corner and I was fishing down. I was just fishing the same area over and over again, and I was fishing down and about to turn back up and come around, and when I turned up, I saw him coming straight down to where I had just been fishing. Now I had just caught one a couple minutes prior, so I knew they were fishing the area. So that's why I was continuing to just kind of make that circle, and he came right down and he caught a good one right in front of me, man, right off the corner of my block basically. And I didn't let that spin me out. I was a little upset to begin with, I'm not gonna lie, because it was pretty clear that I was fishing that area, and it was pretty clear that I had just caught one, you know, so I kind of felt like, oh well, he just saw me catch one and he came over now and just stuck my fish. That's what happens, unfortunately, in tournament angling. Sometimes if you want to cut a check, you can't really necessarily always be the nicest guy. And that's not... If I had said, hey man, I'm fishing here, you mind leaving it alone? He probably would have. I didn't, you know. So I guess bad on me for not just asking, saying, hey man, you know, I'm kind of just like fishing this one little area here. There's all the rest of this. But it is what it is. So moving forward, I kind of stuck to the same game plan that I had been using for a little while, which on day 2 I had switched it up to a jerkbait. I was trying to use a jerkbait just to be a little more aggressive and search out some more active fish and cover more water, because the trick worm, even throwing it weightless, you know, you can work it like a jerkbait, but if you want to keep it down where those fish are at, kind of right on the top of the grass, the submerged vegetation and stuff, it takes a little bit more patience and a little bit more time. So day 2 I was feeling the pressure and I wasn't really willing to fish like that all day long. So the jerkbait came out. I was throwing jerkbait. I caught a few fish on the jerkbait. I caught some non-scoreable fish on the jerkbait. It was the same kind of song and dance, unfortunately, for the majority of day 2. And me and that other guy got to talking. You know, everything was cool. We were just kind of hanging out, fishing next to each other for a little while, and we got to the point where both of us realized it was dead, and needed to make a move. And he went one way and I went the other. And apparently it paid off a little better for him the way he went. So I decided to go down and fish some deeper water that I had seen on charts but not really looked at in practice. I was hoping that there was going to be some grass there, and there was. So I moved off the flat and moved down to some deeper water with some submerged vegetation, and I ended up catching one on a speed worm, just kind of not swimming it, but you know, worming it through the grass. And after that, I started moving around a little bit, just trying to get a better feel for that area, and picked a spot and dropped the anchor, and was able to kind of sit still for a little while and catch, I think I caught one more there. And then I moved on, and I got one more that was my limit, but it was small. At that point, I don't even remember what I had. It was that bad, 60 something inches probably. If, you know, low 60s, because I think my biggest fish that day was like 14 inches at that point or something. I would have to look back to actually be able to even tell you. So I was hurting mentally at that point. I was kind of out of it. I was ready for that tournament to be over. I knew that I wasn't gonna win anything, more than likely, as far as, you know, first, second, third place was certainly out of the question at the beginning of the day, and everything else had faded at that point, aside from maybe the big bass. So I made a pact with myself. I had broken out a glide bait for a little bit and thrown it here and there because the water was really clear, but I just didn't really feel like I wasn't seeing large forage anywhere. So I didn't really know if it would be a deal or not, and I didn't want to waste a bunch of time throwing it when I could catch fish through other means. So I told myself that if I made it to the last like 35-40 minutes and I still hadn't gotten a decent fish, that I was only going to throw the glide bait for the last, remainder of the tournament. And I came down to I had thrown it a bit, and I came down to the last 30, and I put everything else down, and I picked up the glide bait. I ended up making a 7.5-inch cull in the last 30 minutes off of one fish. It was like 2 casts or 3 casts in with the glide bait, and it was a super post-spawn fish. I felt bad, like terrible actually, because it had a complete like innie belly, and it thought it was about to just get a giant meal. After I released that fish, I was getting myself set back on the spot, and unfortunately a pontoon boat full of locals came right off the dock and went right over my grass bed. And I was waving at them and saying, hey, could you please not go over that spot? And they didn't care. So just went right over it, blew it out, and I kind of just moved further down the lake and continued to fish. But at that point, like, I shouldn't have let it, but it kind of took the wind out of my sails, because I was like, well, if there were any fish in that grass bed, they're certainly not going to bite right now. So that was pretty much that, man. I packed it in about 15 minutes later is when the tournament ended. So by the time that had all happened, then I had kind of moved down the lake a little bit. I made some more casts. I did keep fishing right until 3 o'clock, right until line's out. But just wasn't able to pick anything else up, unfortunately. And that was it. So again, 60th out of 155 anglers. I don't remember what my total length was. It doesn't matter. It's not that important when you're down that low in the standings. But I learned some things, and it was a good experience. I'm definitely looking to possibly do another one this year. There's one coming up on Seminole in April. I'm not going to be able to travel a whole lot, unfortunately, because, I'm single, I live alone. I got pets, I got responsibility, I got a job, I got all kinds of stuff I got to deal with. So going all over the country and being able to fish these tournaments regularly is not going to be a thing for me. But doing the ones that come close, we'll see. So maybe you'll see me at another Hobie BOS in April. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you sticking around this long. I'll catch up with you next time. Peace.